Okay, still got some people rolling in, but let's go ahead and get started. Hello, welcome. My name is Mandy Hungerland. I'm the COO here at Dead Ringers, and today I've got the great privilege of hosting a panel of Dead Ringers experts. And we're going to talk about everything death care professionals need to know to grow in 2025. But before we get started, we actually have a message from our sponsors. So let me pull that up and then we'll get going.
Imagine a library of content curated specifically for death care professionals.
Imagine it is full of books, articles, videos, interactive courses, and much more.
Imagine the content spans a huge spectrum of topics, from general phone etiquette to sales skills, from empathy to mindset management.
Now imagine that all of that content lives in your phone or in your web browser. Here at Dead Ringers, we are thrilled to announce that that library is in fact real, and it is opening its virtual doors very, very soon. Introducing C Expertise by Dead Ringers, your online on-demand resource platform for death care professionals.
C Expertise will be available on a membership or individual level. Contact us today to learn more.
Okay, so you might have noticed that our sponsor today is Dead Ringers. Surprise! Dead Ringers is starting fresh in 2025. We've got a new platform, new services, even a new team member who you'll get to meet shortly. And we're very excited to be here today. It would not be a true Dead Ringers webinar without a shameless plug or two or four. But our goal today is to give you a brief overview of 3 different priorities that death care professionals need to have in order to effect positive growth in 2025. 3 priorities, 3 panelists. Let's introduce our panelists in order of focus, which means Paul, you're first.
Well, glad to be here. I was, if you don't know me, my background, I'm a funeral director and embalmer. I'm also an attorney. I work primarily in death care. I know several of you. I see names and faces that we've met and talked. And then I also, one of the founders, created Dead Ringers many years ago, purely because at the time there was no objective way to see if we were actually complying with regulations, let alone, and I don't want to take Nikki's world of the art, but I get frustrated that we didn't have objective data to even know if we were doing it legally. So anyway, welcome. I can't wait to share about that legal side later.
Thanks, Paul. And Nikki, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, as Paul mentioned, I'm kind of the art behind what we do here. And so my role here is helping to create call and customer experiences with our clients. So celebrating 9 years with the company here in April, I think. So we have lots of data. And my role is training live in a classroom. I see some familiar faces. I do virtual training as well. And our goal is to not only be compliant, as Paul said, but I have years of expertise, 35 years within the profession, that it all starts with that first phone call. And that's the main role of what I do to help our funeral directors, cemeterians, pet loss, all of the folks that touch death care.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. Okay, we have a new team member with us today. Pat, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, you're on mute too.
Oh, you're on mute. Hold on. Pat,
All right,
hold
Pat,
on.
you're on mute.
That's so embarrassing.
All
Anyway, how about now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I just want to see if they're paying attention. Never mind.
Pat's in charge of
So,
IT.
Yeah, I'm not the IT guy. And I'm the oldest rookie that Dead Ringers has ever had. But anyway, I've been in the business really since the 80s. I had the privilege of learning the business with my father in Wisconsin and just moved on from there and have worked with the ICCFA for many years. It's been my privilege to be the chancellor of the ICCFAU and the ICFA at the time. But what I will be doing here is just helping with Dead Ringers on training. My gig is sales. I love developing teams and building teams, which I've done all over the US and Canada for about 40 years. So I can't wait to see what we can do for all of you with Dead Ringers.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. And very excited to hear what you have to say shortly. But one last thing before we really get started, we will be doing a Q&A at the end of this webinar. So if you have any questions as you're listening to this panel and listening to Paul and Nikki and Pat, please type those into the chat. We're going to do our best to answer all of the questions in the chat at the end. And if we run out of time for any reason, we will follow up in a response with our recap email. So don't be shy about asking questions. This panel is for you. It's for you and for your firm to be able to grow in 2025, and we want to be a part of that. So post those questions, and let's begin with Paul. I'm going to start with the legal mumbo jumbo first, get that out of the way, and then work our way towards more exciting and inspiring topics. Paul, what legal updates are coming in 2025 that death care professionals really need to be aware of?
So yes, let me get the legal mumbo jumbo out of the way, which at the end everybody's going to like. I love that part, but anyway, the FTC has been on a just a rocket ride this past year of 2024, and there's a lot to look forward to in 2025. And when I say look forward to, you're not going to look forward to any of this, but you need to be aware of it. Look, we could talk about the junk fee rule. We could talk about non-compete rule. We could talk about fake online review rule. These are all new and great things the FTC did. But the reason we're here today and what we really want to talk about is the funeral rule. The funeral rule is under an update / modernization. If you can put one item under what they want, they being the FTC, they want online pricing. They want people to be able to go to your website and see exactly what you charge. Now, I need to go backwards a little bit and get there, because right now you're all like, wait, this is Dead Ringers. We're talking about phone. Why are we now online? Let me tell you how we are getting there. One, you got to go back to 2020. That's when the FTC started their review. And during that period of when we started, a lot of people and a lot of associations, ICCFA for one, I wrote theirs, commented and said why you should or shouldn't change the funeral rule. And there were other associations that made an argument of why we don't need to update the rule. And we were all in favor of not updating, by the way. But one of the arguments that came out from other associations was, look, you don't need to update the rule. There's already an outlet for consumers to get pricing. You don't need the website. You just need a telephone. It's simpler, it's easier, and it's already part of the rule. Right now, anybody could call a funeral home and get prices. Well, that's a great argument. I didn't make it. And the reason I didn't make it is because, I don't know, Dead Ringers, we knew that we aren't that good at this part of it. And for years, I've always said, we are lucky the FTC does not telephone shop funeral homes. Well, fast forward in 2023, the FTC said, you know what? That's your argument. Game on, challenge accepted. They called almost 300 funeral homes to see if they could just get a price. And guess what? They couldn't. We failed. It was over 30% failure, by the way. And so at the end of their review, the telephone sweep, again, first time in history FTC has ever done it. They published in January of 2024 that they had done it. They listed all the funeral homes that failed, and then it went quiet, sort of. Fast forward in November of 2024, just a month ago, and if you don't have this report, email us, we'll get it to you. The FTC rewrote the entire report. They kind of wanted to freshen it up, and it's very detailed. It talks about all of the calls. It talks about what was good, which wasn't much, everything that was bad. They really left the door open and laid the groundwork for this to go on. Side note, two big common issues that they ran into. Number one, no price at all given. Number two, different prices. In other words, they'd call up, they'd get one price, they'd call up again, and they'd get a different price. So to me, if you're going to say what's happening in 2025 that we have to be prepared for, be ready for the FTC.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on here. How can professionals best prepare themselves? And for managers, how can they prepare their teams to stay compliant and stay ahead of all of these regulatory changes that are coming?
All right, I got 2 ways to prepare and 2 ways not to prepare. First one to prepare is training. I mean, it sounds simple, but the problem is, you know, in death care, I think we all believe we know what the funeral rule is. And I sadly we don't. It's so simple, but yet the way it's perceived, the way that it's interpreted, the way that it's compliance, it isn't that easy. So we have to train. We think all of our folks that are working for and with us know what to say, how to say it, when to say it. And the truth is if you haven't told them, there's no way that you know it's going to be regular. Here's the greatest example I can give you. If somebody called your funeral home right now and said, asked a question, do you offer cremation versus what's the cost of cremation versus what's the cost of direct cremation? Those are 3 very, very similar questions that actually have 3 different regulatory answers. And if you're not sharing and training your people on that, you're kind of setting yourself up. So that's how you prepare, number 1. Number 2, an audit. You know, how do you know everybody and you are doing it right if you're not checking? And I don't mean this in a bad way. Look, you know, I used to, for dead ringers, we used to say, hey, don't tell your people that we're going to be calling when we shop. You know what, at this point, tell your people. I would love them to know. My favorite thing is when we do audits and we check and people say, well, I knew that was a shopper. I knew it was dead ringers. Then why did you fail? Like, that's my question. Like, if you knew it was us and it was so easy, why are people still failing? Because I can tell you, and we'll get the stats later, it's bad. But I really recommend, shameless plug, Paul. Well, yeah, it is a little bit, but I'm just telling you, it's hard to check. If you have a way to check yourself, do it. But you really need to have some sort of audit process. Now, 2 ways not to prepare: ignore and hope. Ignore this like it'll never happen to us, or hope that it is somebody else. There are a lot of people that live in those worlds, and I'm telling you, the FTC has stumbled upon an absolute potential gold mine that all they have to do is make phone calls and make money. So that's my easy steps for 2025. Train and audit.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. And you mentioned shameless plug, so I feel like this is a good moment to throw one of those out there. Let's have another message from our sponsor before we continue.
We help funeral homes avoid scary FTC fines.
Did you know that answering your phone could cost you $53,000? Yikes. That's why we prepare your firm before it costs you big. Our on-demand FTC course is designed to equip your team to navigate compliance with confidence.
This course features death care experts who know their stuff. FTC phone audits screen your calls for funeral rule violations.
We'll address issues before they lead to hefty fines. Try GPL review by death care attorney Paul Lemasters.
His expertise will rectify compliance issues so you can have absolute confidence in your GPL. Live workshops are where we'll drill for skill.
Your team will be equipped to tackle any challenge that comes their way.
Rest assured, working with us won't cost anything close to that $50K FTC fine.
Dead Ringers is here for all your FTC needs.
Let's ensure an FTC fine-free future.
Okay, so Paul, I've got one more question for you before we continue. And as we're looking into this new year, everyone's excited. We're all ready to grow. We're all ready to see a shift in our business. Why should death care professionals be investing their time, their money, their energy into compliance? Are there real ramifications for not being prepared for the FTC updates?
All right, I've got a short list. 1, money. I mean, there is a monetary potential, significant monetary fine penalty to you and your company. You know, you saw it's over $50,000. I don't know how many of you are out there that are like, yeah, it's no big deal. I mean, I see Phil out there. He's probably like, you know what, I could handle 4 or 5 of those. That's not going to bother me too much. But most of us are not ready to sit there and throw out $50,000 fines. just to put a number to this, I want you to know this. Last quarter, Dead Ringers, we did about 300 audits. Out of those 300 audits, we found 128 direct violations. These are obvious, blatant direct violations. At over 50 grand, you're talking over $6.5 million in fines. That 1 quarter, you take that out a year, you're over $26 million. As I'm saying these numbers, I'm realizing something. I need a job with the FTC and they don't pay me. They just give me a cut of the whatever I can collect.
Yeah.
And I'm being very facetious. I have a love-hate relationship with the FTC, but it's a big number, and I think we have to be prepared. Side note: right now, under the funeral rule, there is what's called the FROP, Funeral Rule Offenders Program. It's kind of your get out of jail free card. It's been in existence for years. It was created by the National Funeral Directors Association. One of the things that we are all sitting and watching is if we will be able to still continue to have it. What we've heard from the FTC, they don't like it. They don't like it because of two reasons. One, it is run, um, it is basically a self-regulating resolution that the FTC does not really have involvement in, and they don't like that. The other thing is there's an organization at FDA making money off of the penalties that they're trying to prevent. So right now they're not really shot up with excitement about that. So if that fraud disappears, I don't know how we avoid a $50,000 fine. So that's number one. Number two, if I'll switch to the consumer side, image. It used to be if you got hit with an FTC violation, nobody knew. I mean, you knew because you wrote a check, but nobody else knew. Well, now this is big news, and you can go back, pull that report I mentioned. It lists all the funeral homes that were found in violation. And local media, man, they love eating these up with stories because what they write, they copy the FTC and they say, the following funeral homes were found with significant violations under the Federal Trade Commission and practices with consumers. I mean, it sounds horrible. The truth is, you just set a price wrong. I know that. You know that. Consumers don't. Can you build over top of that? Of course you can. But why put yourself in a position? So, image. So, those are two what I would call internal issues. But let me throw a couple external ones out there as well. One, and actually I lied. That was external, but I will go internal and talk about the culture of your own company. There are a lot of people that are now stressed. They don't know what they can say, what they can't say, when to say it, how to say it. And what that leads to is bad information. And the problem is once we have bad information and we become so fearful, and we've seen it in our calls, people are almost shell shocked. So now when somebody calls and says, "Hey, I'm wondering about cremation," it's $795, bye. And it's like they don't want to say anything. And so that leads to the last external fear that you should have. And that is consumers, bad experiences. Because if you're not giving them not only the good information, but giving it in an artful way, that is such a lead in. I don't know what else I can do for you, Nikki. Then that's where you're really missing it. I do want to add one final thing because I know my time is going to be up here, questions later. We do have a lot of shameless plugs in here. If those bother you, you are free to offer to sponsor any one of these webinars or upcoming, and be glad to talk to you about that off camera. So back to you, Mandy.
All right. Well, you were right. That was quite a lead into Nikki's segment. As soon as we start talking about consumer perspective, customer experience, that is her wheelhouse. So we will be transitioning into that segment. But before we do, Nikki or Pat, do you have further comments on this segment on regulatory and compliance?
I'll start here. We started this back in January of last year, and we've heard lots of things. And so what Paul mentioned, kind of the art of this, and we saw some of our overall scores. We score everything start to dip because we were so shocked by the fear of everything. So I think focusing on not just the technical part, but the art, that's what we lost in some of this. So when we talk about training, it's not just being in compliance, but how do you artfully explain these things and not get stopped in your as you're sharing these things with families. So one little stat, I love stats. We measure whether or not folks lead with price first. And Paul mentioned $7.95 for cremation. 82% of the time we lead with our lowest cost option first. So I think this kind of, we hear a certain word and then we go right into price, and that can derail a really good experience, which I'll get to in a moment. So yeah. Pat, do you have anything?
Well, just real quick, I mean, as a customer who has seen what Dead Ringers can do for our companies, I think it's important to know, what do you do after you have the Dead Ringer calls and you have the data and you're listening to these calls. You need to have meetings that take that and work with workshops with your people that need help, that you've identified, but you have to do role plays and just make it a positive culture of self-improvement.
Absolutely. Well, Nikki, uh, Paul started to get into this consumer perspective. There's a term out there, customer experience. We talk about this a lot with Dead Ringers, but many people, they really don't understand what that term means. Can you give us just a short and sweet description of what is customer experience?
Well, CX is kind of the acronym that you'll hear, and it's just easier to say that way, but it's really the life cycle of what a client family experiences with you. And kind of where we come into play is at that very first experience they have with the phone. I think a lot of us do great with our presentations once we get the families inside, whether it's cemetery, funeral, but you're not going to get anywhere if you're not creating a good experience over the phone. One way to think about this is that, are you transactional in how you deal with your clients? A lot of times our calls will sound clinical, literally reading off the GPL, or are you building relationships? And that's the core, the key to a good customer experience versus kind of customer service. AT&T Airlines, that's customer service. That's not who we are. We are about creating experiences, and empathy is a key part of that.
Absolutely. So, what I'm hearing is that a positive interaction over the phone can start a positive CX or customer experience, but a negative interaction over the phone can start a very negative customer experience, which could have ripple effects. So, what effect does customer experience really have on a firm's growth trajectory in 2025?
I like to think of this as the price shopper. And if you're in a large market or you're in a competitive situation, if you're just providing prices and moving on, that will affect just, are you getting those price shoppers? So consumers are a lot different than they were 20 years ago. Speaking of 20 years ago, we started talking about this 20 years ago, and we're still talking about it today and creating experiences. And I think it's really time for us to embrace this. So we can lose clients. If the beginning process is not a smooth one or consistent, or there's a continuity within the organization. I have a great experience on the phone, but I walk into the funeral home and it's something completely different. That makes it a disjointed process in how we serve our families. So there's a great opportunity we're missing or we're gaining based on the experience folks have when they call in.
Absolutely. So, Nikki, in your opinion, is it even possible for a business to grow effectively in 2025 if they're not focused on customer experience?
I think of it as the churn effect. You're just either replacing, customers with customers, and you're not building relationships. So I know we measure call volume and we measure the amount of sale we make or our funeral values. And if we get so caught up into the measures of our balance sheet, that sometimes it's the quality that can really help with that. So going into 2025, you can have a great hit to your bottom line. And I keep talking about price shoppers. We did 1,000 calls in quarter 4 outside of the FTC stuff. And we have a metric that, what was your experience like? It's the one subjective score that we have. And based on the experience that our ringers have, of all of those calls, we gather prices. We do a lot of price shopping. We won. There was a good experience of 1.5 million in revenue. However, we had almost $2 million in lost revenue based on just what the experience was like. So I know you guys have your heritage families that will always come to you, but if you aren't connecting with those new consumers that are calling in, you have dollar signs that you're missing out on. So I like to think, do you have one of your best people on the phone? And I remember my old days that people would put the apprentice on the phone in the funeral home. You know, your first job is to answer the phones, and there's no key training around it. So that's shameless plug. That's what we're here, is to make sure you have your best people on the phone, because they're the entree for new clients into your business. So
Yep. So what I'm hearing is that customer experience is extremely crucial if death care professionals really want to see a positive growth trajectory for their business in this new year.
yeah.
So, Nikki, how can death care professionals ensure that they're providing the kind of customer experience that sets them up for success rather than failure?
It's embracing it. It's the culture. Um, Not just thinking of the day to day, but everyone can embrace, what can I do for a customer versus what I can't do. And I'm not for certain who told me this, but it's like, what our profession is, it's not about you. It's about the client family. And that's kind of a mind shift change, in that, we get caught up in the day to day. We go through this every day. Our client families do not. And one thing that our mission is, how do you want your families to feel when they call into the business? And that is creating CX, in thinking of feelings. I don't want to make this zen and all too kumbaya, but we have to consider what that process is, staying away from the clinical, the vital stats, and moving more to asking questions and offering condolences, asking for names. That helps to personalize things. Speaking of metrics, only 70% of the time in this last round of calls in the fourth quarter did we even ask for names. Thousands of calls. Or 1,000 calls. So training, and training, and making it a process versus an event. And I know you guys have all been in those kinds of trainings. You have, and Pat will lead into this as well, where we have our yearly training and then we move on. You have to revisit the concepts, wash, rinse, repeat. So
Yep.
hope that helps.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned training a couple of times, and so now I feel like it's time for another message from our sponsors about training opportunities. So here we go.
Dead Ringers CX services, that's customer experience, focus on how you're coming across to your consumer.
CX has a huge effect on company growth and revenue.
Before you can improve your CX, you must understand it. We'll start with call evaluations to assess your team's performance.
We'll use what we learned to craft a training game plan that engages every team member.
Next, we'll provide coaching and resources to support long-term, significant improvement. How is your team really handling callers? Are you losing money because of how you answer the phone?
Our ringers will place mystery calls to your firm and analyze them using our advanced rubric.
You'll access your results through our interactive online dashboard, where you'll listen to calls, review scores, and read feedback. Once we've assessed your CX, we'll perform initial training.
Training modules are customized based on your performance results, so we're always targeting your firm's specific needs.
Once training is complete, we reassess your performance and track improvement.
We partner with you to provide one-on-one coaching with individuals.
Our team will be on standby to consult on ongoing challenges, script suggestions, and more.
We are your long-term customer experience partner, equipping your team to service your clients at the highest level, one call at a time.
Contact us today to learn more.
Okay, coming back, talking about customer experience and how it affects a business's growth in 2025. I think we're going to start stepping into another strategy for growth in 2025 with Pat. But before we proceed, Paul or Pat, do you have any additional comments on Nikki's segment here?
I'll throw out one because I have to do the lawyer thing here, right? And one of the interesting things I've seen happen over the years, I handle a lot of complaints, a lot of lawsuits, a lot of regulatory issues. And when you drill down on kind of where it went wrong, a lot of times these families that we are having our issues with, they go all the way back to the initial call, the initial one time that they started talking to somebody. And I don't think we realize the power of that first call, because if that family has a bad experience on that very first call, your arranger or whoever's going to meet the family, they're already behind the 8 ball. And the worst part is look, there may be a bad experience, but if you do nothing else, are we sharing that, hey, this call was not easy? We put first calls in a bucket and say, yeah, we got a first call. But I think you got to start and look at that and go, hey, were there issues? Was it a good first call, bad first call? What were they worried about? What were they asking? You really have to evaluate those, because that is your next step to when you meet the family. And a lot of times families that have had that bad experience, they're coming in and they're on the defense. They're already upset. The arranger, a lot of times chalk it up to, well, they just lost a loved one. It could be more than that. It could be you. So I think that's an important thing to take away from this too.
Absolutely. Pat, do you have any comments on this as well?
I would just say this. I think it's important that you, I found over the years that there can be sensitivity or some egocentric issues on the part of team members who view training as some sort of an indictment of their performance, which it's wise for leaders to do some holistic work before you roll out trainings and work with the calls that you get through dead ringers and such by framing it in line with your company mission along the lines of, we are your self-improvement partner. We're here to become the best. And anything we do along the lines of training or monitoring our own business performance is in that vein. It helps us help you become the best. And that's why we're doing it. So I think it's important just to do that in advance and have a good framework on the training.
Absolutely. And I know that that segues pretty well into what we're going to talk about next. But before we jump in a little further, we've had some new attendees since I initially made this announcement. So a quick reminder, we are doing a Q&A after this final segment. So if you haven't posted a question in the chat yet, please do so. This webinar is for you, and we want to make sure we address any questions that you may have. So put the questions in the chat. If you don't ask, we can't answer. So Pat, let's bring you to the floor. You're on deck. You're one of our newest team members at Dead Ringers, but you're not new to the profession at all. You've got experience backed by a lot of years in sales and management and development, all in the death care profession. So I want to ask you, what do you believe is the most crucial priority for businesses to work on improving in this new year?
I would define it simply as invest in your people first. And I think to explain that, let me make an analogy that is topical for the week of the calendar that we're in. And I think something people can relate to. Um, and you don't have to be a health nut or, someone who automatically goes to the gym. If you do, I congratulate you on that habit. It's an excellent personal habit. However, everyone knows what I would call the health club phenomenon at this time of the year, which is after the first of the year, if you are a person who does go to your health club regularly, you probably had no problem parking most of the year. But right after Christmas and in this first week of January we've just come through, it might be hard to find a parking spot because everyone's there. And the other half of that phenomenon each year is by somewhere around February 15th, you'll have plenty of parking again. So don't fret about that. And we've all heard that story. But the reason I bring it up is I want to make an analogy as to, if you want to invest in your people, your talent, your team, think about the health club concept, but think about it in terms of the company health club, if you will. What is your company health club for your team members? And more importantly, how can you get your team members to enthusiastically not only want to go to your company self-improvement health club, but stay there week after week because they like what's happening? So let me just make a quick analogy for you to think about these points. This comes from Club Solutions Magazine. This is a health club industry pub. And here's what they said. I asked a question into the chat and got this response back and found this magazine. And the question was, what makes a fantastic health club for the people that go there? So if you're thinking about your company health club, I think these apply. There were four of them. And so let me just mention them quickly. The first one was great staff. Great staff. So when you go to the health club, just like your club, you need to be having great staff, building great staff. And I know you have them. Everyone has great staff. So liberate your customer champions and maybe get them into the mentor role, perhaps. But how is your staff? Is your health club have great staff right now? The second one was just the health club was meticulously maintained. It was clean. People that go to the health club, they look for what about your business? Is your business meticulously maintained throughout? Just not the most important quality out of the four, but I think an obvious one. So three was the member experience, exactly what Nikki just talked about with regard to CX. So when it comes to investing in your team and the self-improvement of your people, it's sort of there's a book out, I think it was recently, that was called, the concept throughout the book was good to great. So think about that phrase, just good to great, and think about the people that you have on your team that you might call good to great people. And by that, I mean people who they're good already, they're performing, but when you see these people that they can be great. They could grow into from good to great in their performance and how they love their job, how they engage in your culture and your mission at your business. So the member experience from a health club perspective was the magazine said it feels good from the moment you walk in, and guest members have multiple avenues to achieve their goals at the health club. Well, I think you have to realize that that's a parallel where we need to have multiple ways to improve our people on an individual level, just like at a health club. Every person has a different regimen, maybe different muscle groups, different goals that they want to achieve physically. We also have individual people that need their own individual goals recognized, and that's where Dead Ringers measurement data, the tools that we have with 10 different categories and I think we have up to 70 data points that we can give you measurement feedback and now analytics on. The last one, what makes a great health club, was company culture. The members of the health club and the staff understand what the company stands for, and they believe in that mission. So I guess that's the answer that I would have first, Mandy, is if you want to get on your way to a great year, make sure that you have a company health club. And we do have trainings that we can tell you how to build that. How do you build out your company health club and for your people to engage in self-improvement enthusiastically and continuously?
Yes, I love that analogy because I personally experienced the empty parking lot and then suddenly there's no place to park. But thinking about how that translates to specifically funeral homes, cemeteries, and other death care facilities in 2025, what does it really look like? What concrete steps are involved for death care professionals to focus on people development in 2025?
Well, I would put out something. I like to give acronyms, and one that I think we can all relate to and remember is TLC. So I like to answer your question first by saying, give your organization and your team a little TLC. And that stands for first talent. Of course, we're going to look at our talent first. Do you have enough? And how many good to greats are in there? There's also other groups within your team that you may have to recognize and acknowledge. I mean, we all have our top guns, I sometimes call them in the sales arena, but those are the people that they are just optimum performers. I mean, they walk in the door and boom, they're on. Then you have the good to greats usually, which are people that they might become a top gun with the right coaching and development. Now, you also have some other people in the group that may need not only to be coached up, but some people may need to be coached out. You have some people that are, you might call them questionables on your team that just, they have issues where they're not oriented, they're not engaging, they're negative, things like that. So again, there's a whole spectrum here that you have to look at, but that's the talent part first. And L is leadership. Who's going to do the training, who's going to be the leader that will inspire the people and not just be transactional like a manager that can handle processes, but also a transformational leader who can inspire people and meet them one-to-one. Part of the system is having weekly one-on-ones with your people. That's part of the whole process of your health club, where people feel like, hey, I have a leader I can trust, and I put my faith in that person to help me, challenge me, call me out on occasion, and make me better. And I expect that, and we need those people. Who are those people in your organization? I think when you're hiring, you may need more people. Maybe you're understaffed to have the optimum customer experience, like Nikki talked about. If so, continuously be looking for talent, but don't just look to fill a job description. Look for a leader. Look for certain qualities of a leader as you do that. And then the C in the TLC is communication, and that's critical. Many people who have a culture that they would consider not so hot at their company just feel like they're not in on the communication. They're not communicated to enough properly, personally, or on a level that engages them and gets them excited about what they do. So TLC, just work on those things, and then finally, we have I put it out in a six word system. It's really 3 and 3. The first 3 steps you have to do ahead of time. This is how you design your company health club, and that would be analyze. So analytics, Dead Ringers is all about analytics. We can provide you with calls to your business, and a lot of times people, your team members need to really hear it in reality. This call is you, and this might be done individually rather than in a group, but this call is you. Let's listen. How do you, would you have gone ahead with that call? Would you buy from you? How did you make you feel? Or how would you, it's them. They can't get around it. So that's a good start if it's in the context of, I'm playing this for you to help you be the best. And I don't think you're at your best on this call. What do you think? Let's listen. So these are the kind of things that we can do to do analytics. And then from there, we can strategize a development plan. And after analyzing and strategizing, then we're going to organize exactly what the plan is, and we're going to set forth on a development plan for that person. So that's the first 3 steps. Where we are now, maybe at the beginning of the year, is the second 3 steps, which is once they're on a plan and they're with you, they're engaged, you got that one-on-one weekly communication, and you have great group interaction. Celebrate the wins, celebrate the champions, celebrate the great calls, celebrate the 5-star Google reviews. A lot of you are probably already doing that. So celebrate the wins, celebrate the good stuff in public, and group, and team, and then individually get into the personal development thing. And you put those 2 together, that's part of your health club construction to the 4 walls there for sure. So TLC, and then analyze, strategize, organize, and then mobilize. Just get out there, management by walking around, leadership by engagement, and you will be with your people as they learn and observe. And then, of course, use the resources of Dead Ringers. Anywhere you need us, we're there for you for that. So then you're going to optimize what you're working on and improve, tweak, and then you maximize. And that's, you get the most out of it. You hit your goals, you celebrate, and you win. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I hope everyone's taking notes, because you just dropped like so many nuggets that my brain is trying to catch up, and I get to catch up with you later. So um, before we proceed, and we are stepping into a Q&A section after this, so if you haven't posted your question yet, please do so. I do see some questions popping up in the chat, which is great. Nikki or Paul, do you have any further feedback on this segment before we keep going?
Okay, ladies first. What?
Yes.
I feel so guilty now for not joining the gym. Anyway, I've started my career in pre-need, and when you mention training, a lot of times there are these silos, and it's the at need, or it's the cemetery if you're in a combo, and this culture cannot be siloed. And so the overall concepts and cultures, what Patrick's talked about is not just one group or another group, but it's really a culture within everything that you do. And I think I have one little experience that I had with a large organization near Glendale, California. I helped a friend put some Christmas decorations on a flat stone, and one of the groundspeople was there, and he says, "Happy holidays. Is it okay that I clean this off for you?" That little thing, that you include the entire organization in what you do. And I think, Pat, all of those things that you shared, it can't just be for one group. It may be varying levels of detail with each group, but it has to be across the board. So exciting stuff. TLC, I love it.
Paul, go ahead.
All right. So one of the overall things that I get from you, Pat, all the time, and I think it's invaluable. I'm going to just phrase it a little differently. It's buy-in, because that's really when you have buy-in from all of your folks, that's when your organization changes. And again, leave it to the lawyer to turn this into the legal thing. Again, when I look at issues, I have clients that unfortunately get into trouble more than other clients. And when they ask me why, Paul, does everybody have this problem? And I'm honest with them and saying, no, they don't. And what I typically find in a lot of those scenarios, it's the buy-in. If your people, your folks, your team, if they aren't buying into what you are selling and what you want to do, you will not have consistency. You will have people that make mistakes. You will have complaints, lawsuits, regulatory issues, because they don't care. And it's the reason they don't care is because they're not buying in. And they're not buying in because you're not, Pat, I'm going to say it, they're not building the health club that they want to be part of. So, I think there's a lot, this gets really deep. So I love it. But yeah, I think you've got to work on getting buy-in, and it's what you offer as one of those parts of it.
Just real quick, of course, I always have a second thought, is that you need to train yourselves too. It's not just your staff, but you have to keep on top of things. Pat mentioned good to great. What are your own train the trainer type skills? So I do have a suggestion, and this has become my Bible. I know it's probably back, but it's the customer experience excellence. And there are 6 pillars of customer excellence. I'm not going to, some of the familiar faces out there know what those are, but you need to study on your own and be confident in the training that you deliver outside of what we can provide. So anyway, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Pat. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Paul. These kind of conversations get me fired up because I've seen from my perspective the behind the scenes in Dead Ringers, watching the transformational growth that happens when leadership embraces all of these concepts. So, as I mentioned, we're stepping into a Q&A now, and that means if you haven't posted your question in the chat, do so now. Any questions that are in the chat, we're going to do our best to answer. If we don't have time for it, we will send responses in a recap email. So go ahead and post those questions as we watch our final shameless plug sponsor video, and then we'll get started.
Let's talk about the real secret to success.
Developing your people. People development starts at the top. We'll work with leaders on effective management techniques so they can champion positive growth on their teams.
We'll deliver hands-on, in-the-weeds workshops to develop skill sets and mindsets that benefit them and your business.
We'll provide advanced reporting on staff performance to support recognition and reward programs. Because when people are recognized for their performance, they're more likely to engage and excel.
When you invest in your people, they are more likely to invest their time and energy back into you. We believe people development is the key to implementing and sustaining long-term growth in your firm.
We're here to support your next growth initiative, whether it be evaluation, training, coaching, or a mix of all of the above.
Contact us today to learn more.
Awesome. So we have covered the importance of staying up to date on regulatory issues, keeping your team equipped and engaged there. We've discussed customer experience and how it affects the trajectory of your business. We've also covered people development and cultivating skill sets and mindsets in your team that can further your business growth. So we could talk about these things all day, but we're going to do a Q&A session with anyone who has posted in this chat. We are a little snug on time. We want to be respectful of your time, but if you have to hop off, it's okay. We're going to send a recap email. If you can stay on because we're going to go through these questions. Our first question, and Paul, this is probably going to be one for you, from Holly. How would you all navigate extending discounts because the price won't match your GPL Would you advise telling the family it's a discount or just quoting the discounted price?
So I'll tackle first, but I really want Nikki to follow up on this as well, because again, I believe there's really an art here as well. And it's a deeper dive for sure, but let's go 30,000 foot view. Discounts are allowed, but this is where you can absolutely get tripped up. And again, I'm going to let Nikki, because I know you have some great words on offering discounts in your belief. One, if you're offering discounts, make sure it's a valid discount, and that you're using it uniformly. The example, I'm trying to think of a military discount, right? That's a great one that a lot of people provide. And they'll say, oh, is your loved one happen to be military? Oh, well, yes, they are. Well, we actually offer this for military. Here's a couple of things. If these are standard discounts, one, they should be on your GPL, because if it's not on your GPL, then it's not valid, it's not legal. Two, make sure that your folks, everybody who answers the phone, are presenting them the same way. This is the trick. This is, to me, where discounts can get really messy on the legal side. And again, we could spend a ton of time on this. Matter of fact, I think Nikki and I have this on our 2025 list, that we're going to do a program just on discounts for FTC compliance. So stay tuned for that in 2025. But if you're going to be offering discounts, again, this is how people got caught under the phone sweep. Is one person says, how much is cremation? And somebody says $7.95. And then the other person, how much is cremation? Well, actually, we have a discount, and it's $6.95 right now. And it's like, okay, that's an over $50,000 violation. So you might want to make your discount less to pay for it. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Is they're fine if you've got to have them clear, and everybody's got to be following them the same way. Nikki, what's your thought? Because I know you have some of this as well. You hate them.
I think the first thing is that you are free to ask questions, just as long as you present what's available in your package. And we get caught up on discounts because we're wondering what our competitors are doing. But if you're not creating a good experience first, that may be meaningless. So we don't, just because someone asks the price of something doesn't mean that's where they're coming from. Consumers don't do this every day. The only leverage they may feel that they have is price. So that's the first question that they ask. Paul, I know that there are some specifics. If someone says, what is your lowest cost option for cremation? Then we have to provide it. But it's okay to ask questions. Well, what did you have in mind? What kind of services? And, if those are the kinds of questions you need to get into. Is your dad, was he a veteran? Everything, was he a first responder? All these kinds of questions, what folks are looking for. Someone says cremation, I don't know what it is with their mindset. We don't treat them the same as we would someone that says, how much is a funeral there? So those are the little soft skills that we need to have. So I hope I kind of answered that. And we have a lot more detail on this, but it's all about the questions that you ask.
Yeah, and again, we could, and matter of fact, we are going to spend in 2025 a whole program on this, so stay tuned. But it also gets into another form of discount, which I will just tell you right now, it scares me, but there are firms out there that, hey, our cremation is $7.95. By the way, I am making up a price. I'm not quoting anybody. I don't want to talk about price. But people that say our price is $7.95, but we will match anybody else in town. That could be, if that's your program, again, make sure you're presenting it the same way. There are a lot of potential issues there, including some states that are now questioning if that's valid. Again, more to get into from here, but yeah, I'm going to kind of echo up of Nikki. If you're going to do discounts, I think what you want to do is build up to them. Don't lead with them. Because if you lead with them, I think you have the greater risk of making an error if somebody calls again the second time.
Yeah. And who price matches? Walmart.
Mm.
I mean, if you're going to create an experience, I'll get off my soapbox on that one.
Well, we have another FTC question. Actually, it looks like gear up. We got a couple of FTC questions. Does the FTC and Dead Ringers do pricing calls after business hours?
Great question. I'll say Dead Ringers first. Yes, and I love doing these after-hour calls. I think they're fantastic. And by that, I mean we get some really, really horrible responses after hours. So I think after hours is important. I always tell people challenge your own answering service if you're using one. I'm not picking on any answering service. A lot of times they do better than anybody else. Now, so yes, we do it. To the FTC, yeah, they do. Matter of fact, they intentionally did. For every 3 calls that they would make to one of the places that they would phone shop, they would do up to 3 more after hours to see if it matches. So they absolutely looked at after hours as well.
Awesome. I am reading our next question and my thing is glitching. Hold on. All right. So, will you be compliant with the FTC if you get an email address from the caller and email the price list the same day?
Can I do it? No.
Yes, I think our resident FTC expert should do.
No. Matter of fact, while you're allowed to email them, that is not actually a response that they are looking for. Matter of fact, you can't. There are some of the people that get caught during the FTC sweep is they said, "I will only send you an email," and that is an absolute violation. You cannot require. You are allowed to ask for a name. You're allowed to ask for an email. You're allowed to ask anything you want, but ultimately what you have to deliver is a price if they ask it, and that is the only way is over the phone. If you want to offer to send a GPL in addition to giving them the price over the phone, 100%. But again, let's be careful. The FTC counted violations. So if I said our cremation is, guess what, $7.95, and said, by the way, I'll send you a price list. And if I didn't, because the FTC, when they did it, they gave an email. If I didn't do it, they said, well, that's a violation. And if you did send them an email, but you didn't send them the price list like you said you would, they marked that down as well. So again, opening the door, just make sure that you go in and close the door behind you and don't leave it wide open. So yes.
And the same with websites. We hear our callers say what's on our website, and then they leave it at that. And so we really need to, these though are beautiful things that you can do after you have the pricing discussion to keep you in front of them to say, is it okay that I email you the information that we talked about today? Then you have that email and then you are top of mind. Beautiful with price shoppers. And then secondly, after we close the call today, our website has a lot of good information on it. If you have additional questions, please call me, but just know that our website is also a resource for you. So you can turn these technical things into really good follow-up opportunities. So anyway, had to chime in on that one.
Excellent. We are at 4 p.m., but Paul, I want to ask you this one last question. This is a good one, and I've been hearing this one a lot. Nikki, I think you have too. Paul, what's the likelihood that the FTC will update the funeral rule, and what will that look like? Will it just be online pricing, or are there other changes on the docket?
Yeah, so this is probably the big question everybody's wondering. So first of all, there's a lot of people that think change of power, change of parties inside DC, that this could all go away. I'd put that at a very, very low percentage, and here's why. Since 2020, when this started, back when we actually had Republicans as part of the 5 commissioners, and even now with still, we always have at least 2 of one party, 3 of another. There has not been one Republican commissioner who hasn't agreed that the funeral rule needs to be updated. So I don't see it going away. The other thing is that besides the 5 commissioners, there is a staff. There are hundreds of people. We work closely, we being I with ICCFA, and visit with the FTC staff on a regular basis. And there's a group there. They all are adamant and they truly believe that this not only needs to change, but it will change. So there's a force back there that is going forward. The other thing is some people were like, well, it's 2025. This started in 2020. I mean, it's just going to go away eventually. I will remind you, in 2010, we went through this similar process. Not as much pushback. It wasn't as vocal. There was no online push. It was just an update. It took the FTC 8 years to finally say, let's wait two more years and talk about it. So we're only 5 years in. I believe in the next 1 to 2 years, we could see some change. again, this online world, it's the world we live in. And there's really not a lot of good arguments of why a funeral home wouldn't put their prices online when they're already available if somebody walks in. So yeah, I think it's going to happen. And then again, it'll go to online pricing, and then that'll change how we give prices over the phone. And that we have to wait for. So we'll see, but it's not going to go away.
Okay. Nikki or Pat, any other further comments before we go ahead and release the masses?
I just thank everyone for being on. It's been great, and we do have lots of uh, in-person training or online trainings that you can engage us for, that we'll be happy to provide on any of the topics we've talked about today.
Yeah, and this real quick, we did have a chat question about the book I held up. I think Otto asked that, and it's Customer Experience Excellence, the 6 Pillars of Growth. The authors are David Conway and Tim Knight, so throw that in your Google and get it from your library or order it from Amazon. I've got it pins and clips and everything. It's a great resource. So
Awesome. Well, with that, I hope everybody has a fantastic afternoon. I hope you've taken a lot of notes because we've launched a lot at you in 3 different topics. But the name of the game is growth in 2025. No one wants to end this year in the same place that where they started. So we want to be a part of that process if you'll let us. If you have questions coming out of this, please by all means email us, call us, whatever means of outreach you prefer. And have a wonderful afternoon. Let's go grow together. All right.
thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.